Hello everyone, welcome back to Madat IS. Today we are going to start a new series which is for our ancient sources. So in prelims we have ancient, medieval and modern as a division. Now what we are going to do here is we are going to mark the exact sources from which the questions from the ancient topics have been asked. Now unlike polity, this is not going to be just one book. It's going to be multiple sources. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to, like, let's say you follow one book, let's say you follow NCRT, or let's say you follow Krishna Reddy, or you follow the old NCRT, or you follow Lucent. Any book that you follow, you are supposed to follow that particular book. And any other questions, any extra questions that are coming up, which are not from your particular source, you can just make a note of them and know that they do come from all the sources. But of course, it's not possible for all of us to read all the books just for one topic, or let's say just for 5 or 6 questions. This time we are going to be starting with CDS questions, and after we are done with CDS, we're going to move ahead to CAPF and then to UPSC CSE questions. We're going to start a similar series for geography again. Now, without further ado, let's start. This is a screenshot of how we have done it for polity. We open the book and we mark it in the book itself, like the questions and where the questions have been asked from. For ancient, it'll be a little difficult, but let's see, you'll be able to understand what I'm saying after the video is done. So, starting with 2024 CDS ancient questions. One of the questions was from the Vedic period. The term used for cereals in the Rig Veda: A. Godhuma and Vrihi, B. Yava and Dhanya, C. Tila and Khala, D. Priyangu and Shamyaka. Now, this particular answer is technically given in four different books, right? One of the books is R.S. Sharma, India's Ancient Past Book, chapter 13, page 120. Now, in this page, you can find that Vedic people became acquainted with rice in the dough called as vrihi in the Vedic text, right? And so this is basically about rice and how godhuma and vrihi are cereals, but only vrihi is given here, not godhuma. Then we come to let's say we come to a Tamil Nadu book, History, Volume 1, 2018 edition, Chapter 2, page number 31. Now here you can see very clearly that about Vedic. So this entire paragraph is about the economy and agriculture of the Vedic people, and archaeological evidence points to the development of agriculture among the Rig Vedic people. The plowshare is mentioned in the Rig Vedas, known as Krishi, and refer to plowing. We come down here below. They had knowledge of different seasons, sowing, harvesting, and thrashing. They cultivated barley, yavam, and wheat, godhuma. Now, yavam becomes barley, and godhuma again is a type of cereal. It's wheat. So, coming to another source which has this particular answer. So we can see from Indian History, Krishna Reddy book, second edition, which is your McGraw Hill publication. Under chapter 3, page number 210, under agriculture, if we see, wheat, godhuma was the main staple diet. Other crops were barley, yava, beans, sesame, tila, and cotton. Okay, so from here we also know that tila is sesame, so it's not a cereal crop. And again, yava is barley, right? Now, coming to the Upinder Singh book, chapter 5, Cultural Transitions and Images, Text and Archaeology, page number 198. Technically, most of these are given here. Agriculture increased in importance. Cereals such as barley, yava, wheat, godhuma, rice, vrihi are mentioned. And there are several other agriculture operations such as sowing, plowing, reaping, and threshing. Same book, chapter 10, Emerging Regional Configurations, page number 596. Here, very clearly, it is given in Karnataka area, apart from rice, there was an increased emphasis on various types of millet such as priyangu, ragi, and were inferior varieties of rice such as shamyaka, nivara, kangu, kodwara, karadosha. Okay. Now, see, you don't have to necessarily go ahead and read all the books. I've done this to just map out where the questions come from. What we're supposed to do is just make a note of this question that has been asked and make a note of all the other options as well. So, Godhuma is wheat, Vrihi is rice, Yava is barley, Tila is sesame, Dhanya and Khala I could not find, but from my understanding, Dhanya would be Dhan, and Priyangu and Shaimaka we have read it's given here. So, in terms of extra information, let's just learn all of these. Godhuma is wheat, primary cereal. Vrihi is rice, which is also another primary cereal. Yava is barley. Dhanya is a general term for grains. Tila is sesame. Khala means threshed grain. Okay. Ikshu means sugarcane. In early medieval South India, Priyangu is a type of millet and Shamaka is a type of millet. Okay. Coming to question number 2, from 2024 CDS paper 2. The topic is prehistoric rock paintings. Now this we can find again in two books. One would be your Indian History by Krishna Reddy, chapter 1, page number 38, where we read from for Bhimbetka caves located about 45 kilometer northeast of Bhopal in Madhya Pradesh. These caves were accidentally discovered in 1957-58 by Dr. Vishnu Vakankar of Vikram University, Ujjain. Subsequent excavations revealed remains serially from lower Paleolithic age to early medieval age. The caves have rock paintings going back to 15,000 years in vivid and panoramic details. Right? Coming to the other book, Upinder Singh, Chapter 2, Hunter Gatherers of Paleolithic and Mesolithic Ages, page number 89. And again, Chapter 2, page number 92. Very clearly, so this particular question was necessarily asked from our Upinder Singh book. The first rock paintings in India and in fact anywhere in the world were discovered by ACL Carlyle, an assistant surveyor with the Archaeological Survey of India at Sohiga Ghat in Kaimur Hills in the present day Mirzapur district, UP. In 1857, archaeologist V.S. Vakankar noticed the Bhimbetka rocks out of a train window while traveling from Bhopal to Itarsi and got off as the nearest railway station to explore. This is one of the most magnificent rock art sites in the world that were discovered. Bhimbetka is one of the 7 hills marked by a very picturesque natural environment. Chapter 2, page 92. Just one second. Yeah. So this is about the rock arts that exist in Odisha. An interesting feature of the rock art of Odisha is the coexistence of paintings and engravings in the same shelter. Now, these three statements are relatively very difficult. It's not possible to technically do it in the exam because nobody is going ahead and reading Upinder Singh book just for 5 questions of ancient. But because this has been asked once, there's a possibility it can be asked in other UPSC papers, like it can be asked in CAPF, it can be repeated in UPSC CSE. So we are going to do at least the questions of the papers that are done by UPSC. Now, with reference to Mesolithic art in India, consider the following statement. Alexander Burns discovered the first rock painting at India at Sohia Ghat in Uttar Pradesh. Now, we can see that this is an incorrect statement. The answer is ACL Carlyle. Bhimbetka rock paintings were discovered when archaeologist V.S. Vakankar noticed the rocks out of a train window while traveling from Bhopal to Itarsi and got off as the nearest railway station to explore the site. So, this is a correct statement. The paintings and engravings do not exist in the same shelter in the rock art of Odisha. As we can see from this statement, this is an incorrect statement. Extra information, okay, this is just the repeated answer. So answer here becomes B2 only. Some more information about this particular topic. This is also technically given in, some part of it is given in the NCERT, An Introduction to Indian Art, Part 1, Prehistoric Rock Paintings. And just a second. The caves of Bhimbetka were discovered in 1857 to 58 by the eminent archaeologist V.S. Vakankar. Technically, this statement is given here, but the other part that he noticed it while he was traveling from Bhopal to Itarsi is only given in Upinder Singh, right? So this is technically half the answer for us. Now coming to Tamil Nadu book, volume 1, 2018 edition, chapter 1, page number 11. Here, very clearly, okay. So one of the options had Alexander Burns written here. So Burns written here. So let's read up a little bit about him. From this page 11 of Tamil Nadu book, the Indus Valley site for Harappa was first visited by Charles Mason in 1826 and Amri by Alexander Burns in 1831. The site of Harappa was destroyed for laying the railway line from Lahore to Multan. The seal from this site reached Alexander Cunningham, the first surveyor of the Archaeological Survey of India. Alexander Cunningham visited the site in 1853, 56, and 75, but the importance of the site and the associated civilization were not realized until Sir John Marshall took over the Director General of ASI and initiated research at the site. So let's like just learn a few facts about this person, Alexander Burnes. He has written a book, Travels into Bukhara. It was in his pursuance of commercial motives that in 1831, Sir Alexander Burnes, under orders from Lord Edinburgh, the then president of Board of Control, was sent for exploration of the Indus under the pretense of carrying presents to Ranjit Singh at Lahore. Right? So he has more connection to Lahore and Sindh and Bukhara, not necessarily to what we are reading in terms of like, finding prehistoric rock paintings. And just a second, he also visited the site of Amri in 1831. Now, Alexander Burns as an option has also been asked in UPSC 1997 paper. Who among the following was associated with the suppression of thugs? So the correct answer here is Captain C. Sleeman, not Alexander Burns. I think like you might think that this is not relevant, this is confusing, but what I'm trying to do here is talk about all the options as well of a particular question and see that where those options have been mentioned in our source books. Please don't go around and read up all the books that have been mentioned here. Whatever source you're following, just put a page right there and make a note of these points, all these extra questions from other topics, no matter what paper you're preparing for. If you're preparing for CDS or CAP or for UPSC, just write this down so that if at all this gets repeated, because the chances of this getting repeated is much higher than anything else, we are not at a loss, right? Coming to the third question, the topic is Buddhist art. In the decoration of stupa, what does the term Kiljan Kani refers to? Now, this is not mentioned in any of the resources. For future references, we can remember that Kiljan Kani refers to a garland of 1,000 lotus flowers. And mango-shaped pendants are Manga Malaya necklace featuring mango-shaped pendants is a prominent piece of South Indian jewelry, particularly popular in Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Coming to question number 4, the topic is the Mauryan times or the Ashokan times. Which of the following are the correct components of the lion capital at Sarnath? The shaft, Stambha Yashti, or the tall tapering column? An elliptical top part, the abacus, devoid of any carvings. Overflowing inverted petals below the abacus. We have to make sure of reading these words like no, devoid, only, things like that. Now let's say, coming to the answer. So this particular answer is technically given in the NCERT and Introduction to Indian Art Part 1, Arts of the Mauryan Period chapter 3, page number 20. The capital originally consisted of 5 component parts: the shaft, which is broken in many parts now, a lotus bell base, a drum on the bell base with 4 animals proceeding clockwise, the figures of 4 majestic adorned V lions, the crowning element, Dharmachakra large wheel was also part of this pillar. However, this wheel is broken lying condition, displayed in the site museum at Sarnath. Chapter 3, again page number 23. The Mauryan pillar capital found at Sarnath, popularly known as the Lion Capital, is the finest example of Mauryan sculptural tradition. It is also a national album. It is carved with considerable care, voluminous roaring lion figures firmly standing on a circular abacus, which is carved with the figures of horse, bull, lion, elephant in vigorous movement and execution with precision. Now, technically, the point 1 is given here. Overflowing inverted petals below the abacus. Just a second, I think I read so a lotus bell base. So, overflowing inverted petals below the abacus of a lotus. Now, the elliptical top part, the abacus is devoid of any carvings, is not directly given here, but it's very unlikely that it'll be devoid of any carvings. But let's just see from the Indian History Krishna Reddy second edition, page number 459. The capital of Sarnath pillar is undoubtedly the most magnificent and the best piece in the series. The wonderful lifelike figures of the 4 lions standing back to back, and the smaller, graceful and stately figures of 4 animals in relief on the abacus, and the inverted lotus all indicate a highly advanced form of art. Now again, inverted lotus, so C3 becomes correct, and this is also correct from here. Uh, Nowhere it is given that it is devoid of any carvings, but most necessarily we are talking about the part, everything has carvings. I mean, I know that's not directly given, but this is an incorrect statement. The answer becomes 1 and 3 only. This is the picture from the NCRT, pillar capital and abacus with stylized lotus. Coming to question number 5, I think. So, this is about Chola metal sculpture. Consider the following statements about the ancient Hindu metal images in India. The Chola period is well known for the aesthetic and technical finesse of its metal sculpture. The iconography and style of Chola metal images were similar to those of their stone counterparts. This is from Upinder Singh book, chapter 10, Emerging Regional Configurations, circa 600 to 1200 CE, page number 641. There's an entire heading named Chola metal sculpture. The Chola period is well known for the aesthetic and technical finesse of its metal sculpture, line by line copied here. The metal images of North India tend to be hollow, while those of South India were solid. Both were, however, made through the lost wax method. Traditionally, the northern images are supposed to be made out of an alloy of 8 metals, while the southern are supposed to be made of alloy of 5 metals. The analysis of actual images indicate that these formulae were not always followed. The iconography and style of metal images was similar to those of their stone counterparts. Both the statements have directly been picked up from here. Both are correct. Answer is 1 and 2. Again, please don't go ahead and start reading Upinder Singh book. This is just to map out the sources. The Antariya was a garment worn by people during the Mauryan period. Now, I could not find this in any of our regular sources, like the 5-6 books that are there. For future references, we are going to remember that the Antariya is an unstitched length of cloth draped around the body, right? Coming to the next question, again, this question is from the Mauryan period. Consider the following pairs of high offices and concerned departments in the Mauryan administration. Samahatri, Chief Collector of Revenue, Dawarika, Chief of Army, Akshapatala, Records cum Audits Officer, Samnidhatri, Treasurer. I might be pronouncing it wrong, but please bear with me. So here 2 is incorrect. Which of the following correct are matched? 1, 3 and 4 is the answer. Now let us see from where it is asked. So very clearly, if we see Chapter 7, Power and Piety, Upinder Singh book, Mauryan Empire, circa 324, 187 BCE, page number 344. The Arthashastra mentions the Samahartri, Chief Collector of Revenue, was in charge of many accounts. Samnidhatri, Treasurer. It also mentions officers such as Dawarika, so this is Chief of Palace Attendants. The Antar Vamshika, Chief of Palace Guards, and a large number of Adhyaksha, departmental heads. The Akshapatala office in the capital was a records cum audit office. So this is getting answered from here. Dawarika is a chief of palace attendants and Antarvamshika is the chief of palace guards. Now this is also in the Lucent GK, so I've taken it from Lucent GK 2003 version, 23 version, page number 40. Important officials list is given here. Sanidhata, Chief Treasury Officer. Now here it is given Samaharta and this is Samahartri, I think the Collector of General Revenue. Akshapatala, again Records cum Audits Officer, Accounts General. Sita Dhaksha, Supervised Agriculture. Panya Dhaksha, Superintendent of Commerce. Samast Dhaksha, Superintendent of Market. Now this is a question that has also been asked in CAPF 2017. Here we had to mark these answers. So again, Samatri, Samnadhatri, Dhaksha, Antaravamiksha. So this is repeated technically a few of the points. Now, of course, we can't remember all of them, but at least the ones which have already been asked, like these 4, and the 2 here that are given, which are not similar, right? So we should at least remember those. So we should remember these 6 officers for our future references if it ever gets asked again in CDS or in UPSC or in any of the papers. Coming to the next question, the topic is, okay, so now we have reached 2024 CDS 1 question, so I think there were only 6 questions there. The topic is Chalcolithic sites. Consider the following statements about the Jorwe culture of the Deccan. It covers practically the whole of modern Maharashtra except the coastal Konkan district. The Pravara Godavari Valley seems to have been the nuclear zone. The large sites of this culture yield evidence of shifting agriculture. Now, please remember that here we are talking of Chalcolithic sites, and they're talking about evidence of shifting agriculture. So, this raises a question mark in our heads any which ways. Now, coming to the answer, uh, just a second. I think this is given in Lucent GK 2023. I'll still check. I'll put it up in the next video if it is directly given. If I put up a picture here, then it might be there. I might have forgotten to attach the screenshot. Now, this is of course given in the Upinder Singh book, Chapter 5, Cultural Traditions, Images from Text and Archaeology, 2000 to 600 BCE, page number 232. The Jorwe culture of the Deccan. The Jorwe culture was first discovered at the site of Jorwe and was later to have extended over a large area, covering practically the whole of modern Maharashtra except the coastal Konkan district. The Pravara Godavari Valley seem to have been a nuclear zone of this culture. Directly, these two statements have been copied here. The peripheral zone extended up to Tapi River in north and Krishna in the south. The main excavated sites are Daimabad, Imamgaon, Therur, Songaon, Chandoli, Bahal, Prakash, Jorve, and Nevasa. Prakash is the largest Jorve site in the Tapi Valley, Daimabad in the Godavari Valley, and Imamgaon in the Bhima Valley. All these settlements were 20 hectares or more in size. These large sites represented permanent agriculture villages, not shifting agriculture. Jorve, Bahal, and Nevasa are medium-sized settlements. The average Jorve culture settlements were, however, much smaller, usually 1 to 2 hectares. Agriculture cum pastoral occupations, while Garmals appear to have been a temporary campsite located close to source of Chalkadone. These facts point to the existence of settlement hierarchy. Radiocarbon dating from Nevasa, Chandoli, and Songaon suggests a time frame. This is not relevant. See, so now what is important here is we of course remember these 2 points. We also remember that this is a permanent agriculture site. We do remember the other names of the sites from this period, and we remember which is the largest site in Tapi Valley, and Daimabad in Godavari, and Imamgaon in the Bhima Valley. Right? I've also attached a picture here of which represents which. This is the Jorve culture, and I think this is more or less it we should remember from this question. Coming to the next question, consider the following statements about Madurai, the capital city of Pandya kingdom. It has been described in Madurai Kanchi as a large grand city enclosed by walls on 3 sides and the Vaigai river on the 4th side. The Arthashastra mention it as a center of fine cotton textiles. Other literary sources describe it as a major craft center. Now, statement 3 is a relatively general statement, so usually statements like these are correct, but of course there's always a risk about attempting these questions, so preferably leave them if we don't know anything about them. Coming to the source, this is from Upinder Singh book, Chapter 8, Interaction and Innovation, circa 200 BCE to 300 CE, page number 401. Madurai district, Tamil Nadu, capital of Pandya kingdom, is celebrated in Tamil tradition as a place where the 3rd Sangam was held. There is a description of Madurai in the Madurai Kanchi, which is a part of Pattu Pattu, and it describes it as a large grand city enclosed by walls on the 3 sides and the Vaigai river on the 4th side. Right, so this statement becomes directly correct. There is mention of its palace, temples, large houses, and 2 markets. Literally sources describe Madurai as major center of crafts such as making of gold ornaments. So statement 3 is here correct. The Arthashastra mentions Madurai as a center of fine cotton textiles. Again, statement 2 is correct. Please just remember this from this question and move ahead. Do not start reading the entire chapter or the book. Coming to the next question, again, so this year a lot of questions were asked for Upinder Singh. This is not true for every year. There are questions from NCERT as well that are asked. We might find them in the medieval and the modern section. Again, the topic is Mauryan. Consider the following statements about the Mauryan state and the forest people. I'm not going to read up all the points. 3 points are here correct. Second point is incorrect, the sole monopoly of the forest people. These are directly given here in Chapter 8, Power and Piety, the Mauryan Empire, circa 324 to 187 BCE, page number 348. The history of tribes and forests has to be prized out of sources that generally had hostile attitude towards them, building on D.D. Koshambi's observations on the implications of the expansion of agriculture in empire under the Mauryas. Alok Parashan Sen points out that no matter how powerful an ancient empire might have been, it would have been faced difficulties containing diverse ethnic populations. She argued that in the modern period, new forms of political, economic, and ideological dominance were imposed on the forest people, and the need to subordinate and assimilate them led to a change in the earlier attitude of excluding these people from imperial territory. The Arthashastra uses general terms millet Jati with distinctly pejorative connotations to refer to forest people, but it also distinguishes between different groups within this category. For instance, the term Atavika refers to wild savage tribes who continue to be and I cannot pronounce this word, ensconced in the forest and pose a perennial problem for the state. They're described as independent, well organized, brave, and giving to looting and killing. The term Aranchara, on the other hand, had different connotations. This reflected in the Arthashastra recommendation that fortresses under the command of the frontier chief should be constructed at the frontiers of the kingdom, and the area between the frontier and these fortresses should be guarded by Chandalas. The Arthashastra recommended that the spies disguised as hermits could be used to spy on the territories of forest people. It also suggested that the possibility of winning over forest chiefs with bribes. Okay, so this is a huge paragraph here. Just one more second. So here it is written: forest produce was considered a state monopoly. Mm. Just a second, let us read the options now. The forest people were subjected to new forms of political and social economic dominance, and necessity to subordinate and eliminate them led to the change in the earlier attitude of excluding these people from imperial territory. Okay, so here it is very clearly written that how they were, the new forms of these ideological dominances were imposed on forest people and how they were excluded from imperial territory. Statement 1 becomes directly correct. For statement 2, we can see here that forest produce was considered a state monopoly. Here it is written the state recognized that the forest produce was the sole monopoly of the forest people. Right, so this is incorrect. Also, this is incorrect by some logic that no state will ever recognize the sole monopoly of forest people. The state was concerned with the conservation of forests, and to this end, the burning of forests was prohibited. I'm pretty sure it is given somewhere here. If I have not read it, I know if it is given somewhere here. Even if it is not given here, this is a correct statement. The forest people could be harnessed to serve the state and could be used as troops, spies, and assassins. Now, again, this was given somewhere on these lines that this is a correct statement. Now, the answer becomes 1, 3, and 4. Again, we don't attempt these questions in the paper unless we know anything about them, or we do it just by the sole logic, which is very difficult to actually apply here because how many of the above statements are correct, so we do skip these. Coming to the next question, the topic is Buddhism and Chola. Who among the following Chola kings encouraged the Sailendra ruler of Free Vijayanagar to build a Buddhist vihara in Negapatnam? The answer is Rajaraja I. We find this answer in Tamil Nadu History, Volume 1, 2018 edition, Chapter 3, Rise of Territorial Kingdoms and New Religious Sects, page number 53. Buddhism in Tamil Nadu. It's given here, just a second. Yeah. In CE 106, during the reign of Rajaraja I, Sri Vijaya King Mara Vijayatunga Varman built a Buddhist temple in Negapattinam. It is called the Sulami Varma Vihara. Now, why I've attached this entire paragraph here is because we should be reading this now, because this has been asked for a Chola king. We should also read this thing. The Buddhist temple was also built in Negapattinam at the request of a Chinese ruler during the reign of the Pallava king Narsimha II in CE 695 to 722. And Chinese monk Wu Hing visited this monastery. This becomes an important point, which is very, very related to the question that is asked here. This is a paragraph you can read if you want to. I don't think it's that relevant, but I've still attached it here about the Buddhism in Tamil Nadu. So see, going forward now, Buddhism in Tamil Nadu becomes like an important topic. Anything can be asked from here, but again, we cannot mug up everything. Maybe we can mug up this one statement that is given to this, like, which is very similar to this statement. And coming to the next question. Okay, so we've come to the 2023 video. Like, I'm gonna make a separate video for this. We're gonna end here. I hope this made sense. I understand that this is not as sorted as the polity videos, but as we keep on doing these for every year, we're gonna see a lot of similarities between the CAPF, CDS, and the UPSC papers. I hope you like it. Please let me know in the comments if this is something you want to see. Thank you.